kind of going to give a brief overview today of my experience with virtual reality construction, specifically with Enscape. A little bit about me. I worked internally for GC. The technologies when I was the innovation manager that I worked on, a lot of LiDAR, 360 cameras, laser scanning, drones, like an entire reality capture suite. And when we implemented virtual reality, we see it more than anything as a collaboration tool. So that is the underlying message with everything that I'll be presenting on today. I also worked in the field as a superintendent, so focused mostly on exterior systems, but also did some time in a very complex mechanical penthouse. And then another background is I was a research associate at Harvard, where I focused on high-end photogrammetry and creating essentially virtual Harvard. The agenda, so starting with design review, logistics planning, and mechanical coordination. I'm going to start on use cases first. So if you see nothing else, at least you get to take away a couple ideas of how you can use virtual reality. Getting started. So even if you are, whether you already have purchased a headset and you have a computer that's operable, I'm going to go over a couple best practices on how to make that experience better. And then implementation, I'm going to talk more about my experience with how to roll this out internal at an organization, whether you're just starting or you've already, kind of started testing the waters, and, how do you start tracking the ROI of what you're doing? So we're going to kick it off with design review. One of the most important things, especially if you have the option of a design build where you're working with the design team and you're walking the owner through the space, is getting sign-offs and approval on all the materials that are going to be used, that the final client and end user is content with what's going on. Because what you don't want to happen is for something to get changed halfway through. I mean, we've all seen with COVID, the material delays and, different systems are getting delayed out months and months ahead of time. So getting ahead of a lot of those as soon as possible is extremely important. Getting the end user review. So if you work in the life sciences or hospital space, this is probably one of the easiest gimmies. It's going to be like surgery rooms or getting the patient rooms where the actual end user, whoever is going to be spending 8 to 12 hours a day there, they want to be able to make sure that they can use virtual reality to, can you access everything that you need within the space that you are standing? This is sometimes an afterthought when it comes to the end user, because it's just like, all right, how do we fit everything mechanically? Med gas, et cetera, everything gets put in place. But if it's not usable, it's going to end up getting ripped up anyways. And having to go redo work is not necessarily about the money, but more about the time that your team is mobilized on a site. And then obviously just the satisfaction from the owner or whoever is the inheritor of the building, that they're happy that it got done once. It was preventative rather than reactive. Virtual mock-ups. So this is one of my personal favorites. Like I said, I worked on exterior systems. The intricacies of a curtain wall with AVB and how things get tied in. As many people know, a lot of these shop drawings are, they work in theory, but when you actually get into the field is when all the problems in the world come out of nowhere. Somebody says, hey, yeah, well, yes, I own that metal cladding, but I don't own the blocking that is going to receive that. Or even worse, nobody thinks about it until you actually get to the space. In this particular scenario on the left, you'll see just a regular 2D architectural cut section. And you can begin to see how things start tying into each other. But that might only work well in that one specific siloed scenario. When you are able to kind of drag a cut section across in 3D to say that parapet's actually at a slope, and once it intersects, you actually need a custom piece of cladding that you didn't think about. bringing in your entire team, so your subcontractors who are actually going to be installing this. It's very easy for somebody to draw AVB or waterproofing, tucking under something. But if you go into virtual reality and you can't even fit your hand in there, then you start realizing that a lot of these aren't constructible. So I highly recommend this for constructability reviews. Obviously, you still need, in most scenarios, the real mock-up of a curtain wall system so you can tell quality. But there are a lot of things that you can be preventative ahead of time before you even order the actual mock-up that you can do virtually. Moving on to the next section, logistics planning. And also, just to let everybody know, we're going to be doing questions more at the end, just in case I may answer some on the way. And we'll probably break it down into the construction questions and then the technical questions towards the end of that. So going on to logistics planning, one of my personal favorites. Nothing like getting ready for the next job. You have your team, your pre-con team, the actual team that's going to be on the site, kind of working together to figure out, how you're going to build this thing. Previous company, Consigli Construction, was kind enough to lend me some of their logistics plans and the architectural and construction visualization that they provide to either owners or internal. This is a really good example on how to use virtual reality. So when you start setting up your site scrim, you start figuring out, okay, how is everything going to be blocked off from the street? Being able to bring in the owner of the building and showing them, hey, this is what your site's going to look like for the next 2 years. Are you good with that? Any stakeholders around the area. So there's no surprises, because the last thing you want to do is get to a site, mobilize, start setting up, and then you realize that, there's an issue with whatever you're doing. Being able to show where the swing staging is going, how you're going to replace even logistically a couple items. For example, and this is a window replacement. Towards the bottom is a really good example of the view from a covered walkway. If you have your existing tenants being occupied in a certain portion of that building, what are they going to see every day when they walk out? Say, for example, a hospital renovation project. If you're going to shut down one area of the hospital, what is that going to mean in terms of not just optics, but logistics on how people even get around, trucks getting in and out, et cetera. Now, this is more of the visualization on the actual site logistics. So being able to bring your team into a site where they are seeing different phases broken out into, setup, steel erection, site work, pretty much bringing through the construction project. It's interesting that something somebody told me once that has always kind of stuck with me is that, for example, with sports teams, you practice before you get to the big game. In construction, you're building a physical product, but there isn't any practice. And that is kind of what BIM has been focused on of implementing, is how do we virtually build this physical product ahead of time, figure out as much issues, and then, go into the game actually prepared. Virtual reality is just another extension of that. It's how do you put yourself in a physical presence that, sometimes coordination doesn't pick everything up. You've been in the business long enough. You have a gut feel when you feel like, that might pass code, but I know the fire marshal is not going to be okay with that. Putting yourself in a one-to-one perspective is a powerful tool. And if you are building a physical product, then one of the best things you can use virtual reality for is visualizing that product. Ongoing more site logistics, being able to choose between, what type of slayer wall you may or may not want. Having the option with Enscape is powerful because yes, you can view it on a 2D screen, but then you have the option of going in and out from virtual reality to not virtual reality, rather than kind of being locked into, say, for example, building a custom app on, I don't want to name a company, but building a custom app on, said product, and then only being able to view that in virtual reality. Having the cross functionality where you're tied into Revit, being able to make live design changes with your team in person with the first person perspective is just a powerful tool overall. Another shout out. Thank you, Consigli, for those photos. This is from the actual Enscape example product that they have on their website. Being able to look at constructability and assembly. I used to work with exterior systems once again, and being able to bring subcontractors to say, are we using staging? Are we using a boom lift? How are you going to physically get your materials up here? How are you going to install it? When you actually have somebody in a virtual basket of a boom lift, 80 feet in the air, trying to put in a window or trying to, waterproof something or install a parapet detail, how does that actually feel when you're in a one-to-one perspective? And how do we start thinking about, okay, maybe we have to change the detail so we can install this from the roof over a hanging as opposed to from below. Just something, just something to start conversations, make sure everything's getting thought through. Getting on to my personal favorite, MEP coordination. So MEPs are amazing. It seems like, these penthouses and mechanical systems get tighter and tighter. Now that everything can get coordinated down to a 16th of an inch, that's just less leeway and give that people are going to give to you because everything should be perfect. Joking, but also serious. When it comes down to logistics on install, this is another thing I love using virtual reality for. Also coordination. So the way clash detection works for those not from the VDC world or BIM side is two model elements in a coordination software clash. That triggers a clash detection. So there are times where, yes, you may not have a clash per se, but something may not be feasible, such as how is the facility manager going to get in there and turn off this valve? Right. So technically, yes, you may have your clearance around this box, 3 feet, etc. But if you can't even get into the space very easily, for example, it's like an emergency shut off, then later on down the line, they're going to realize, hey, that's not really accessible. I need you to add a couple more shutoffs here and there. Being preventative, being able to get these done ahead of time. So when you're setting up your wiring, there's no, last second, oh, let's just Mickey Mouse this. Because that is the worst case scenario. It takes more time, or even worse, ripping it out and just redoing something. Here is a video example of the kind of what you can expect for quality wise when it comes to logistics. This company is Atlantic BIM Consulting that was able to provide me with these videos. And actually previously that was Fitzmyer and Tachi Associates. I got that video from online. Going into this, I had a mechanical penthouse where it was, 16 inch chiller piping, obviously sprinkler pipes on top of that. You had beams that still had to get spray fireproofed because the roof wasn't on yet. There, logistically, there was a lot of things that were tight. And somebody told me that always stuck with me as well was mechanical systems and penthouses are all about sequence. If you can coordinate and plan the sequence of how things get installed and you make sure those get installed correctly, then you will be successful. But once things start going haywire and off the rails of how people kind of want to go, that's when those big mess ups start happening. So being able to put yourself in a first person perspective and just feel, right? If you've ever looked at a mechanical drawing, a 2D mechanical drawing, it looks like spaghetti, especially for the younger, newer to construction people like myself. Being able to have just another reference to see something from a different perspective. Once I said code violations or clearance boxes, things may not get flagged. Even in a lot of models, people will put like their a clearance box, like a virtual box to see if anything clashes with it. But like I said, just because it doesn't trigger a clash doesn't mean your inspector doesn't want it a certain way. So, being able to bring people as far ahead of time, especially consultants on code, is always important. Facility management input. Here's another beautiful rendering by Atlantic BIM Consulting. So just being able to make sure that everybody's on the same page of the quality of work that they should be expecting, the way the hangers are placed, they're not in the way of other things, etc. And not even facility wise, you could have a, say for example, a piece of duct that comes down next to a light. The architect could very easily check that out, and or somebody of the owner saying, hey, I want all of these openings 7 feet to the right instead, from whatever perspective that they want. This is a model from the interior design using Autodesk Revit 2022 by Daniel Johnstein. All right, getting into getting started. So the way I'm going to break this down is you want to get Enscape. So they're offering, Microsol's offering a free trial. Take it. If you already have Revit or one of the other compatible softwares, it doesn't hurt you to try it out. At least if you're not going to use it for virtual reality, but at least just to kind of get like a workflow going of what that just on-screen collaboration starts to look like. Second is purchase a VR headset. So I'm going to go through a couple of recommended ones. Third, get training. What that training might look like. Annalisa and her team can talk more in depth about that later on if there's any specific questions. And then deploy. So how do you get buy-in from your executives, or how do you get buy-in from the field teams to actually want to use this and show them value in the short amount of time that they may be expecting you to show them value? Hardware requirements. So on Enscape's website, they actually have the requirements of what they believe, your graphics card, VRAM, and what headsets they support. Something I'm going to just give out is I threw an example MSI mobile workstation. It's a WS66. That is kind of a pricier option, but if you're going to do this, if you're going to have one computer dedicated for almost your entire company at first, you want to make sure that can support any type of size model. So architectural visualization is, very, very graphics card heavy, but also if you're starting to add in these complex mechanical penthouses with, 5-6 different coordination models installed, it's going to bog you down. Trying to have that real-time render is not going to be easy for any normal computer. So you don't want to lose buy-in because you didn't have the right computer. Do it the first time, at least do it right, have the right tool for the right job. Example headset on all these videos that I'll be showing are going to be from the Meta Quest 2. I like it. Something that is almost necessary is going to be a hardwire link. So they have an Oculus link cable, but there are substitutes that are cheaper and I'd say just as good. And also, if you buy the Oculus link cable, make sure that you have a USB 3.0 port in your computer, because if you don't, you're going to have to buy like this 3.0 to USB 2.0 adapter. It's kind of annoying, but other substitutes will have like an actual normal option to plug into. Software requirements. So, say you're already getting started, you just bought the headset. You're going to want to make sure you have the Oculus set up. Make sure you set up the live link. I prefer the hardwire link over the air link for transferring data. It's not going to be the same experience. And then also you're going to want to download the Enscape plugin for Revit, also for SketchUp, Rhino, Vectorworks, and ArchiCAD. Here's a video of me getting it set up. So in virtual reality, I'm starting up my computer, and this is my computer screen. I already had Revit popped open, and I went to the Enscape plugin, launched it. Once Enscape opens up, I'm able to turn on the virtual reality link, and it teleports me into the project. Once you're in that project, you have a couple of different options to move around: room scale, walk mode, walk mode or fly mode, or you could be seated versus, actually be able to move around at walk mode. This is that previous example where I was putting myself between a crevice and being able to discern, all right, is this going to become a problem? Let's make sure that we flag this with the proper teams. Going into a virtual camera, you're able to take screen captures, which may be good for a constructability review report, depending on how you kind of, handle those, whether you send this in an email or you just put it together in an overall document for coordination questions. Presentation mode, super useful. Instead of having to shoot your way and, have people wait for you to jump around, you're able to kind of set these hotspots within the Enscape. That's super useful if you need to show them, all right, today we're going to go over these 3 to 4 different, hot areas that we need to talk about. Let's be able to pull up presentation mode and jump to each. 2 export and sharing options. So you are able to render in a 360 panorama. So you can do a mono panorama if you are going to host it on like a Google Drive and somebody's just going to view it from their phone. Or you can render a stereo panorama, which is used for like the Google Cardboard, like the very dumb VR headsets. You also have the option of exporting an executable. So the EXE, what that's going to allow you to do is start sharing this at scale. So if you have a project team with a compatible computer elsewhere that doesn't have Revit on their computer or even the Enscape license, you're able to download almost like your own siloed version of an app in this scenario. This is within that executable. You have all the same functionality with a couple limitations, I believe. You're able to turn on virtual reality. If you have a headset connected, it'll automatically prompt you in there. Turn it back off. It's nice that you have the option to go from VR to not VR and be able to kind of fly it, say, for example, on a field office TV screen where you have maybe 10 to 15 people looking at it, but you take over the person of highest importance for whatever trade you're looking at and putting them in VR, getting their input live with the rest of the people in there on how they might affect their trades or coordination. Rollout strategies. So this is one of the, this is just my personal opinion. This is not any official way to go about this, but this is kind of what's worked for me with a couple different softwares. Test phase. So starting on test phase and then how do you deploy at scale? Starting with the test phase, you're able to identify a project type. So start saying, what's our company's bread and butter and where do I think this may have the most value? So you're looking at healthcare, life sciences, academic, multifamily housing, whatever. Start there. All right, I'm going to just focus on this one specific sector. Within that sector, identify the users that are going to be your champions. So what that means is the people who are open-minded to doing this, the people who are willing to kind of, bear with you a little bit to get it going, receive the training, and then hopefully potentially even be advocates for you in the future. It's one thing for the VDC guy to, promote VR, but it's another thing for a senior superintendent to say, I actually really found value in this, and I want my fellow colleagues in field operations or fellow project managers to do the same. Third is record qualitative data. So this is one of the toughest things in construction, because when people start talking about ROI, they try to put everything in terms of dollars, but how do you put a dollar value saved to an owner having a better user experience with your general contracting company, and then hopefully that leading to repeat work? Or how do you put a dollar value on them changing that material and how much time and money that would have cost you if you got the wrong material and had to repeat it without going through hoops and bounds of, getting all these numbers together. So I would say record the qualitative data, all the stories and experiences, and then do a follow-up debrief of how you can turn that into quantitative data. So hours saved, if you did this coordination, how many hours did this save you in the field without having to, deal with this later on versus if you just did it now. Going on to deployment. So you want to present at the internal meetings. So the field operations meetings, the project management meetings, heck, even safety meetings, if you want to start thinking about this as a organizational tool. You kind of want to identify a budget and where the costs are going to go for the time of the person helping out or the software costs, how are they going to be billed? But that's why you want to have that previous ROI, because if you can tell a project team, I'm going to save you 10 to 20 hours in coordination and you bill out at X amount of dollars an hour, you're able to expedite that, provide a better user experience, and make a return on your money while paying for a software. It's make it as much of a no-brainer as possible, but you need to really make sure you document those test phases to get buy-in to do this at scale. And then you kind of want to build an SOP. So, once you start testing out a couple different sectors or a couple different project phases, then you want to see, all right, where is this providing the most value and how do we make this standard? So any job that is for example, a healthcare renovation over 50 million, we're going to use virtual reality at this specific phase in the project. Creating systems, and then you're able to track out how many projects a year you typically do, how much you're paying for the software, and then you can start making that connection of what that billing should look like to kind of either break even or, the goal would be to break even with everybody's time and costs involved while getting a ROI in just hours saved per project and just building a better project.